Welcome to the New Dawn podcast. I'm your host, Dawn Lisht. This podcast is for those who are ready to find emotional and mental freedom and expand into the total essence of you. As your coach and guide, I can see what most people cannot see, and I dare to say what most people wouldn't dare to say. I bring hope, clarity, healing, expansion, and massive amounts of love into your life. What I know about healing and success is that it starts with believing that the most important relationship you'll ever have is with yourself. And to commit to loving yourself is the most loving, rebellious, courageous, and empowering act you will ever give yourself in this lifetime. On the podcast today, I have invited my gorgeous and very wonderful partner, Ben, to come and have a conversation with me about a topic that he and I had been talking about. We talk about this one a lot and all of the time because identity is who we are, who we believe ourselves to be, and who we feel we can and can't be. And so we're going to talk about identity and how we lose ourselves in relationships and why we lose ourselves in relationships and what we can do about it. This is an experience, as we talk about in this podcast, that both Ben and I have experienced, sometimes for similar reasons and sometimes for different reasons, and the effect that that's had. But in today's podcast, we want to share with you our experience and what's happened to us in the past and what you can do with practical steps of where to go from here. This might be one of the most important podcasts you ever listen to, especially for your healing journey and how to overcome many of your wonky wounds that you find yourself in with your relationships or in your dating patterns or why you're struggling in your relationship right now. I would love to hear your feedback. I would love to hear from you and your experiences if this has touched you in some way. If you find this information useful, please let me know. In the meantime, I do have a couple of spots open at the moment for one-to-one Essence of You coaching, which is an 8 to 12 week program to start off with. And the focus is on your relationship with you, which then therefore affects every single relationship you have with everybody else. So if you would like to get in contact with me, you can either contact me on Instagram, which is @dawnlisht_, or you can email me at dlucht@mac.com. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy this conversation. Ben and I are very playful when we get together, when we talk about these things, and very serious. So you'll hear a bit of both of those things as we go along. But thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Dawn.
Thank you for sitting with me today to record this. We tried doing this last night, didn't we? But we started doing the recording and then realised we were both tired. So here we are, round 2. And today's topic...
The good thing, I just want to add, the good thing about doing it again is we haven't got the cat trying to destroy lampshades and other things that the cat was trying to do because the cat is fast asleep.
Yeah, the cat's asleep and the kid's asleep. So right now we've got a quiet house. So we've down tools of Christmas preparations, which was...
hilarious.
Well,
oh, come on,
depends
hilarious.
On the perspective this morning.
We all found it hilarious.
Did we?
The dancing has been amazing.
Dancing
music
was good. Yeah.
There's been music.
And just creative license when it comes to putting Christmas stuff together. On the whole, I think is a woman's... a woman has a better eye for this stuff than the men in my life seem to.
Rude.
Yes, rude, but accurate. Anyway.
I think that's just an across-the-board thing, isn't it, really?
I don't know. I think it seems to be, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway. You and I love having these deep and meaningful chats. It's
the kind of chats that put people off chatting to us. I think we found.
Well, yeah, sometimes, definitely. But one of the conversations we were having yesterday was about how both of us have, in hindsight, definitely lost our identities when being in relationships, and we're talking about that as well, basically, because in this relationship, and I can only speak for myself, I feel like the most me ever, and that you encourage me to be the most me, and don't, in fact, to the point where if I was to say something to you like, what do you prefer? Would you like me to look like this or like this? And you'd say, I don't know, you do you. Like, I'm not going to influence you. And if you imagine...
The only thing I'm careful with is if you ask me if your arse looks fat in that dress, whatever dress or whatever you're wearing. The answer is always yes, and I like it.
To be fair, I've never asked you that question, and it's a trap, and I'm unlikely to ever ask you that question because I've been married. I know the drill. I know how that works. But what I've found is that I lost my train of thought then.
No, it's all right. So we were talking really about relationships we've been in previously, and this isn't just relationships with
romantic ones.
Romantic ones. This is all sorts of relationships, friendship circles, all sorts of things where you're trying to fit in, and rather than just being your authentic self, you have these fears of being rejected and all that kind of stuff. And I know, like, my biggest fear really was to be rejected by people because I wanted to fit in. Certainly when you're younger, you feel like you want to fit in, don't you? And you start playing this kind of chameleon game, this thing where you're just trying to be the right kind of person for those people, whether they're the right people for you or not. And it's the same with relationships. And so I wanted to ask you some questions about your thoughts on that. So one of the important ones, I think, is when you get into a relationship. Well, there's two questions really. One is, why do we lose ourselves in relationships? And the other thing is, how do you find and keep your identity? You know, so it's all about identity. Why do you lose your identity in relationships?
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't that everybody will lose that, because you've got people with stronger identities, stronger senses of self, and then you've got people who haven't. So it really kind of depends on that. But for people who either haven't got a strong sense of identity, or they don't know what their identity is, because I know I've been through so many different kind of iterations and things. It got to a point where I didn't really know what I liked, what I wanted, all that kind of stuff. And I had to go right back to sort of before my teens sort of thing to find what I really enjoyed, what lit me up. It was a bit of a process, but you get there.
Well, I think that speaks to what I've just remembered what I was going to say earlier, which is, I ask you this question, like, what do you think looks better? And that's years and years and years of me trying to look my best for the person that I'm with, to try to get them to love me or like me or want me the most. And I can feel that there's still moments that I do that with you, and you don't engage, like, sometimes frustratingly so, because that pattern is so strong in me, and I reckon it's very strong in a lot of people, maybe especially women, I don't know. But it's definitely one that says, who do you want me to be most loved, most liked, most adored, most well thought of, and the most perfect, exactly. And the uncomfortable thing about that, about you showing me where I still have that pattern, has been to go, okay, well, in the space that you've created by not sharing a view about that, it means that I have to step into that space and figure out, how do I want to feel, and what am I comfortable with, and how do I want to look. And and part of that journey, as you know, has involved dyeing my hair pink. It has involved me looking into other forms of self-expression through clothes, through tattoos or piercings, or whether I want to do that or not do that. These are just questions that I have. And when you're in a relationship like I was previously, where the person I was with had extremely strong view of what I should wear, how my hair should be, to the point where the comment was always, oh, your hair's too thick, you should have it thinned. And so I did. And it was such a strong judgment from them that when I was no longer with them, and ever since then, there's one thing that never happens, is my hair never gets thinned. And I love how big and bushy my hair is. And
have it thick while you can.
Have it thick. Yeah, and it feels like the most me. And that's a choice. It's not even a reaction anymore out of that situation. It's genuinely a choice. But when you've spent such a long time having somebody's gaze upon you, criticizing you, especially, and you and I talked about this last night, especially down to breast size. He had a very, 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 very strong view of what I should look like and how that should be, and it included the size of my body. And I'm definitely not alone here, but that deconditioning, to come out of that, and because there was so much self-rejection involved in those conversations, everything that was mentioned was often in the negative, and that was years and years and years. So for me to sit here today and still have parts of those, still feels uncomfortable, but I also know that if it was truly my decision, I would always make choices and options based on, how do I want to feel, rather than how do you want to see me, how do you want to objectify me, how do you want to fancy me. I always want you to fancy me, for sure. That's an important concern. I'm not going to let myself quote unquote go, whatever that means. I want to take effort and look after myself and keep myself healthy and, out of respect for myself. But also there is a part of me that wants you to fancy me.
There's a part of me that wants to fancy you too.
You being rude.
I wasn't, but now I just thought about it. It sounds it, doesn't it?
So rude.
So just quickly, your situation was that you were forced to be like that. But
I was forced to be like that, but I already had low self-worth going into that relationship, which meant I was...
what I was going to say is, the thing with me, I wasn't forced to be something I didn't want to be. I felt like I had to be like that to fit in. So it's interesting that we've got two things where we try to be different to what we really should be, rather than authentic to ourselves, but coming from two different points. I was never... People didn't say to me, oh, you have to... Other than me having long hair and people would go, oh, why don't you cut your hair short or whatever. But other than that, and I never did, because it was one of the things that I really liked. But other than that, it was always me assuming that other people wanted to be a certain way so that I would fit in. And that was my own doing in that case.
But I had that too. I definitely, if you... I don't think it's uncommon for people to want to fit in, especially, when you're in your teens and all that kind of stuff. That's a ripe time to want to create relationships and connections and fit in and all that kind of stuff. But I also had the added thing where, when I was in France, they said, well, you're an outcast, you're English. And when I'm in England, they're basically at school especially, it was, well, you're French, you don't belong. So I was always thinking, well, I don't belong anywhere. And so as a teenager and adult, I was always doing the whole chameleon thing like you, trying to find my way. The irony is that no matter how much I tried, I just didn't fit in, or whatever that meant. I still was the weird one, or the odd one, or the one that nobody, when you can see somebody's confusion come over their face and they're like, what is she talking about?
Yeah.
You have that happen as well. I see sometimes that still happens to you.
I'm one of those people who I kind of, I was a bit like one of the in-betweeners at school, where I'd be sort of almost with the popular crowd on the edge, and then also with the geeks, nerds and stuff like that. And so I never really was in either of the groups. I was like my own group, which was a really bizarre thing, and I think it kind of set me up for the rest of my life in many ways. And now I'm just kind of finding sort of my path and going, I don't really care what people think. I'm just going to do what I enjoy, what lights me up, that kind of thing.
We both encourage each other to do that more and more, don't we? Like there's...
Find your people.
Yeah, find your
Not
people.
Not try and fit in with people who aren't right for you, I suppose.
Yeah. And I think I do believe that at the core of all of us is an essence of who we are that is magnetized to us and belongs to us, and it's our job to get to know that essence of who you are so completely that you're living it and breathing it every single day, and then surrounding yourself with people who celebrate that too. And I think when we're in so much pain and turmoil and anxiety about how we look and what we're doing and feeling uncomfortable or feeling lost, I think those are signs that we're away from the essence of who we are. And the journey is to ask yourself the question, who am I? And I know that sounds like a massive one, but it doesn't have to be. Like, it is potentially the question. But if you start off by, and this is what happened when I left my relationship, I was like, right, there was a whole load of behavioural patterns that I had put in place unknowingly, unconsciously, as wounds, reactions to wounds, that I knew had made me a match to that relationship that I was in. And I came out of that one and I fundamentally knew that I couldn't do that again. And so I had to take a long, hard look at myself, like a proper inventory of the patterns, the wounds, the experiences. Basically, I put it down into this very simple equations. What emotions do I have? What thoughts do I have? Which equal what behaviours? So the behaviours were, for me, were I was a match to this relationship, but I had emotions and thoughts about myself that had made the outcome that I allowed myself to be in that kind of relationship. I'm all unconscious at this point. And so when I came out of that, I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Because I can't do that again. I won't do that again, ever. Like, that was a commitment I made to myself. I'd rather be single for the rest of my life than experience anything like that ever again. And so I looked at my emotions, my wounds, my thoughts, my experiences, my feelings, and I am on a journey to get to know myself as deeply and as intimately as possible, including the first initial questions were, well, what do I like? What do I enjoy? It's like that scene out of that film, The Runaway Bride, and I think I've mentioned this one before, and it's, what's her name? Erin Brockovich lady. Julia Roberts. Yeah, she's in the film. And
I remembered the name. I'm so happy.
And she says, that she doesn't know how she likes her eggs, because she's always had her eggs depending on whatever the boyfriend or husband that she was with, actually it was never husband at that point, however they liked it. And so that's how she liked it. And so her journey was just to go on and discover, well, how do I like my eggs? And that's, as stupid as that sounds, it's also, in my living room, I had a bright red wall. And now it's just this gorgeous blue colour that when I'm in here, I always feel so snugly and warm and calm. But before, it felt massively aggressive and on edge and angry. And I didn't know that about my relationship to just wall colours until I was out of there. How did you start your journey to figure out that you had to embrace the essence of you?
I went through, after like divorce and things, I was meeting new people. I was still sort of unsure of where I fit in to society and things like that, where I fitted in. There were some things that I knew I really loved, like Dungeons and Dragons, tabletop role-playing games, things like that, really geeky stuff that I'd never really fully embraced because I didn't necessarily know. Well, I did know people who like that sort of thing, but I'd moved away from where they were. And obviously as humans we want to fit in, so going around and declaring to the whole world that, hey, I like this stuff, with the risk of being ridiculed for it, it's kind of a big step in a way, isn't it? And you've got to be really sure about how you feel inside about things like rejection and stuff, because that's a big old fear. As humans, our whole purpose is the safety in numbers and safety of the social groups, all that kind of thing. It's sort of inside us, it's bred into us. And I know there's people who think loneliness, being on their own, is really peaceful. I feel like that as well. I like being on my own, but
I do too.
To really thrive, you need other people as well. So you have to sort of marry those two things up. And when we were early humans, if we were outcast from the group, that was practically a death sentence, and we've still got a bit of that left in it. So it never feels good to be outcast in any way, rejected in any way, because it can mean death.
I think there's also, we're all hardwired for connection.
Yeah,
and
that's all part of that same thing, isn't it? Like the connection and stuff means you're part of a group, means you're going to do better at hunting, building, gathering, and just generally just feel better about your life, feel part of something bigger than you.
But the irony I found is that I have way better connections and relationships and all of those things now that I have explored and embraced more of myself and who I am and what I enjoy. Like, my relationship with you is the best that I've ever been in. My friendships now are some of the most rewarding and satisfying and supportive and loving. My relationship with Drew, gets better. I mean, he's a tween, but he has his ups and downs, but it's still getting better and better. And I know that is all a direct reflection of the fact that I feel like I belong to me now, and I'm not looking to everybody else to make me feel validated or belonging. And ironically, that comes as a natural result of me doing that for myself.
There's a peacefulness in that, isn't there?
There really is.
You can. So it's kind of going against what I just said, I suppose, that you can thrive by
but we
yourself.
need both.
Yeah, you need both. You need that connection to build. You can survive by yourself, and you can be okay by yourself. You can be comfortable by yourself. But if you want to be something more and something bigger, I think you need other people.
Definitely. I think in order to thrive, you do need relationships and community and connection. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think not having... I mean, there's so much you could say about how we even get into this place in the first place. Like, how do we even...
One of the things... So, one of my questions was, how do you find and keep identity? We've kind of covered a little bit how we both did that, but is there, do you think, a step-by-step process maybe that people can follow?
I've got some principles that are good to follow, and you can kind of step by step. Not really. I think.
Well, end of interview.
End of interview. But I do think it's really. I will share with you some principles of what I think go into helping you find and keep your identity and embrace who you are. And then pick one that you resonate with the most and go towards that one first. Do you know what I mean? There's always two aspects to this. Every single thing that you and I talk about and what I share in my coaching always boils down to two things. The first is, how am I relating to my old patterns and wounds and my attachment style and who I am?
Whether you're even aware of patterns and...
Yes, awareness is key, right? And then number two is, how am I relating to this newer version of me, or discovery of the essence of me, which is the core part of who you are. So both are a process of discovery and awareness. But like you just said, the first part of part one is always, do I have awareness of my own patterns and my behaviours that are and thoughts, right? Thoughts and feelings that are creating what's happening now. Do I have awareness of that? If I don't, there's no opportunity for change. You can't change what you can't see. You know that whole saying, once you spot it, you got it.
No.
Oh, once you spot it, you got it.
I do now.
But the idea is that once you have identified, or have somebody who has supported you in identifying, because it's really tricky
to identify. It's hard to see your own.
It's hard
patterns,
to see. Yeah, it is.
Because you're so used to it. It's not a thought, is it?
It's not a thought. And often we imagine that these wounded patterns are who we are. They are the core of our identity, and they're not. And so when you are in space with somebody who can see the difference, they can say, oh no, that's not really the truth of who you are, the essence of you. It's a wounded reaction that you've learnt and embodied.
I think sometimes with patterns, though, it's not that you think it's a core of you. Sometimes because you don't see them, you can project that onto other people, and you think, all certain people are like this, all certain people are like that. But it's not necessarily that all people are like that. It's just you keep meeting those people, or there's something that you do that is just not conducive to having a good relationship with certain types of people, that kind of thing. But you don't see it in and of yourself because it's just part of normal day. It's like waking up and eating and breathing and things like that. It's just, you're just so used to it, you don't see those things. Yeah,
exactly. And that's why it's really helpful to have somebody who you've made discerning trust, and a decision that you can trust their judgment to help you see those parts, because it can be unbelievably liberating for you to go, oh, you mean I don't have to navigate my life or react in that way or do that? And each time you're feeling like you're suffering or hurting. Then I'd say learn about boundaries. Boundaries, my goodness. Who are you? What do you want? What do you accept? What you don't accept? What do you stand for? What do you allow? What you don't allow? I think if there was one thing to take away from today, it would be figure out what you want and what you don't want, and then
what you like and what you don't like.
And then don't deviate from it.
That is a really good way to sort of build up resilience to, I suppose, bullshit, really.
And that whole people
question swear on the BBC.
And it makes you question your people pleaser skills.
Yeah.
Because often what's underpinning all of this stuff for you and I and many of the people I've spoken to is the people pleaser wound. And you have to, in order for you to be perceived and liked in that way, you have to sacrifice yourself in the process. There's no other way. And what you're sacrificing is the essence of who you are.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the risk you're taking as well as what you're sacrificing is you're risking alienating people, you're risking rejection, you're risking all of that kind of stuff. And that's scary. That is so scary if you're the kind of person who needs people.
What would you say to somebody who was experiencing that then?
What would I say? I don't know. It's one of those things where sometimes you just got to cut away the fat to get to the meat, get to the good stuff, haven't you, really? It's easy to have people just hanging on, or you being a hanger. I mean, I've felt like a hanger-oner many a time. But yeah, I'm a firm believer in, if you're scared of something, you've got to kind of just do it to get over that fear, unless it's something stupid like jumping out of a plane without a parachute. I'd be scared of that, but I wouldn't do it because it's stupid.
And you'd only do it once.
Yeah. It'd be the last thing I do. Yippee-ki-yay! I mean, there's certain things that I'd be scared of doing, and I absolutely would not do it, and you couldn't pay me enough money, like doing that caving thing where you're going through really small spaces. But the great thing about people is there's an awful lot of them. So being rejected by a few is not the be all and end all of the world, and you can't please everyone, you can't make everyone like you. There's always more people, and it's working out. Part of your identity and finding your identity is finding what the fears are to do with those things. Are you comfortably uncomfortable in the life you've got? You don't do anything else because even though your life is crap, it could get worse. Well, life's a roller coaster, isn't it? It's got its ups and downs, and sometimes you got to go down to go up.
I think what for a lot of people it seems to be, and it has been for me, is if I put up boundaries for this person and then I alienate this person, then I'm alone. There's no one else, and this is it. This is all that I have access to. There's nothing else, and that's the thought that kept me very, very much stuck in that loop, and keeping that identity was, if I don't people please, if I don't take advantage. I don't mean it take advantage of, but if I don't capitalize on the fact that I have these people in my life, then I will have nobody. And I would rather be a people pleaser with these people than have nobody. And it's such a black and white way of thinking about it. And yet it's not true. Yes, you might have a period of time where there aren't the people around you that you want. But the more you start saying to, magnetically to the universe, this is who I am and this is what I enjoy, and then go and do those things, the more you're going to attract those kind of people to you anyway. And then before long, you will be so surprised at the quality of the relationships and the people around you, because you rumbled with the discomfort of people pleasing and stopping and breaking that cycle and choosing a different thing. There's what we try to do so much is make all of these decisions, especially about identity, to try to stop us feeling bad. Right, at the core of so much of the work that I do, it comes down to, how do I avoid feeling bad? How do I avoid overwhelming feelings?
Something as you were just saying that, is feeling bad the same as not feeling happy? Because I wonder how many people sort of go, well, I'm not happy at the moment, so I must be sad, or I must be, rather than just being at a level where you're not depressed, you're not unhappy or anything like that. It's just a day. It's just a Tuesday or whatever. And I wonder how many people think that you have to be happy all the time to have a good life, to thrive, all that kind of stuff. And so when you're at a level where you're not excited or you're not up, then that must mean you're down. And it's like a weird thought process in their head. What do you think about that?
On the whole, I think we have a very challenging relationship to our own emotional world. And I think that, and the way that we experience our own thoughts as well. And so...
Well, that's part of an identity, isn't it?
Yeah.
You filter your thoughts.
And, many of us push our feelings down or try to numb them out, or...
That's me.
That's you.
Or it used to be.
Or, get sucked in like tidal waves into their emotional world like I did. And then maybe have drink or food or whatever to try and make it feel more manageable. But at the core, a lot of us are just always trying to avoid feeling uncomfortable, feeling emotionally uncomfortable, whatever that means. And it stems from really, really early on. And part of figuring out who we are and what we're about means learning to rumble with the discomfort of upsetting somebody and feeling uncomfortable that you've upset somebody, working on those fears, right? Working with the fear of not doing something because it feels too hard and too much, but knowing that what you want is really on the other side of that fear or the anxiety, or these are all, how do we hold the emotions inside of ourselves and what do we do with it? And most of the time we want to resist it, reject it, move away from it, and push it down so that it doesn't have to feel so overwhelming. And a lot of the work that I do is to find hope within that and ease within that and liberation, so that you feel ultimately stronger. That's what we're talking about here. Boundaries is about feeling stronger and more confident in yourself to go, I don't want that. And then each time you make that decision and act on it, you feel stronger. And then your confidence grows, and then you feel stronger again, and then your confidence grows a little bit more. And then, then you start going, okay, well, I'm going to try out doing this now and doing this now and doing this now. But you have to start off rumbling with the discomfort for this stuff. And it's unsexy, right? Talking about everybody wants a hack. It's not fun. It's not always fun. It's not always fun. But the reward is out of this world. Like it's absolutely... And you and I have both done it. You and I are both people who have found our own ways of dealing with a lot of big feelings. Yours has been to numb it out. Squash them, which is a very typical male way of doing it. And mine was, I couldn't squash them. I really, 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 really tried. but they were just there all
Just
of the
didn't
time.
try hard enough.
That's definitely one thing that you can't say about me. I definitely tried hard enough, but they were just ever present and always big, always a lot, overwhelming, massively overwhelming, to the point of depression and all sorts of stuff, anxiety and panic attacks, and yet both of us have, on our own personal journeys. Tell me if I'm wrong, right? I don't want to speak for you and get it wrong, but we both had to rumble with our own fears and the discomfort of those feelings, to know that, you know what, no matter what happens, we're okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's that thing where if you're sat with yourself for an hour, 2 hours, whatever, 10 minutes, are you okay with sitting with yourself and your own thoughts and stuff like that? I mean, I know people who absolutely hate that. They have to fill in the time, just be busy all the time, just so they're not having to have that moment with themselves. You know, they're either having to be out doing stuff or organising stuff, seeing people, and it constantly looks like they've got stuff going on, but the reason they've got stuff going on is because they're not happy with just having a moment of quiet, and yet they always moan about not having a moment to themselves, which they don't really want, because when they get a moment to themselves, it's busying doing something else.
And that's where the awareness comes in. Yeah. You know, I think we're at a I don't know if you would agree with this, but I believe that we're at a pinnacle point in the evolution of humanity in terms of consciousness. That means that we are now having to take stock of where we're at as individuals, to go, is this okay? Am I all right? Do I want more? Am I able to navigate my mental and emotional world and my relationships and my connections and my life in the way that I want to, freely, with choice? Or do I always feel like I'm suffering? Do I feel like I'm resentful and bitter or annoyed or angry or overwhelmed? I feel that we are at that point now where we have to take stock, or, well, you don't have to do anything.
Bless you.
Bless me. But that there's impetus and energy behind us in order to go there, to look at it, and to bring awareness to what's going on. What would you say to that?
I was just thinking about part of what you said, which sent me off a tangent of how at the moment technology has outpaced humans' ability to adapt to the forms of communication and what we're regaled with on the internet, and our ability to process the different things that come in all the time on our little handheld machines and computer screens. Well, that was a rhyme. We can't deal with that because our brains aren't made up to deal with that kind of thing. That constant barrage of people saying they don't like whatever about us, or this is the best thing since sliced bread and we don't like that. And what we do lack is sort of connection with real people. But then if we're constantly being told that we aren't good enough, or what we like shouldn't be liked, you know, and all that, how do you have your own identity? I think people struggle nowadays with identity because
it does feel scarier, right? To say,
yeah,
oh, this is me.
Everyone's told what is right and what is wrong, but it's changing so quickly. You can't keep up with it, you know. And I know I'm a bit of an old bastard, but and old school people are definitely going to be like, well, kids nowadays, they've got no mental resilience. They've got no ability to take a bit of banter or all this kind of stuff. And I get what teenagers and young people want to achieve, and to some extent that kind of thing needs to be done to achieve it. But also I think people do lack resilience nowadays to be able to just go, oh, that's just a joke, and it can sort of run off them like water off a duck's back, that kind of thing. But I do think identity nowadays, if we're coming back to keeping identity, in a way it's a lot harder for teenagers than it ever was in our time.
Yes, there's a lot of social pressure. I am. There's a lot of social pressure, like in ways that I don't think I can even fathom, because I haven't had that experience. And I'm quite visible on social media and stuff now anyway, but my whole social network isn't passing comment on me all of the time and then discussing it repeatedly at school every day. That's for sure, that's not happening for me. And it wasn't when I left school. At the end of the day, I could go home, and unless the house phone, somebody called the house phone or they knocked at my front door, I was pretty oblivious to anything else that was going on. And we have no ability, or our teenagers these days have no ability to switch off. Not really, unless of course your parent takes away your phone or whatever. And so there is. And I think we often, when we get to a crisis, it happens because somebody is really, really, really struggling. And from what you've said and from what we see, we're reaching a crisis point where people have spent so much time looking for their identities in validation from other people that at some point it's going to explode, or is exploding. And the mental health of our teenagers, the mental health of our children, and then the young adults is at crisis point. And if we can, I think it's across the board, to be honest. I think there's a mental health crisis across the board for everybody. The stories I hear, even in my own network these days, of what's going on, is people are struggling, really struggling. And if we do not take the time and invest energy and awareness in an effort into our own emotional world, and find people who can guide us into that space, I think we're in trouble. And I do think that's the answer. Coming back together as community, teaching each other and being taught how to navigate our inner worlds. I don't think there's any other solution here. I don't think medication is the solution across the board for all of this. I think we have to take the effort to go within. It's a big topic.
It is. And we tend to tangent off.
Yeah, we do.
So how do you feel? So you've got emotions, and you've got what you could, I suppose, consider as a more logical way of thinking, a logical thought process. How do you work emotions and logic in a way that can help you with your identity? Say you're a super emotional person, and maybe it's the emotions that you feel push people away. A lot of people can't deal with other people's emotions, especially big ones. And then you're trying to work through that logically, but you've got no way of really sort of working that, because these feelings are inside you and they need to get out. And then there's the opposite way, where, more like me, you've got these emotions that are just pushed down and everything is just logical and you're trying to find your identity, but all it is just, not so much now, but all it is you taking one logical step towards something else, and eventually you're going, well, I enjoy doing this, and you're trying to get the passion, get the energy out to really commit to doing things, rather than just throwing darts at a dartboard with your eyes blind, hoping it'll hit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The questions I'm asking, sort of mixing the logic and the feelings.
I think there needs to be a buy-in, an understanding at the beginning of that conversation, which says, why should I even bother? You know?
Why should I?
Yeah. Well, you and I have talked about this a lot. Like, the ultimate reason is because we are hardwired. Again, this is my belief. We are hardwired to be emotional beings. Our connections, our desires, our relationships, everything that means something, that has meaning, our creativity, our intimacy, all of it is only as good as the quality of our relationship to our own inner world, our emotions. And for many of us, if not all of us, we have had big T trauma and small t trauma. And the more trauma that you've had and the more experiences that you've had that have impacted you, have created sort of a box around the heart, which stop you from being the essence of who you are. And I think it's our role to explore what that means. And so for me then, it would be two things. One, find people, not just one person, because it does take a village to help you uncover and evolve. Like, even if you were just to watch YouTube videos, I'd say explore all of the YouTube videos. Go and explore different modalities, somatic therapy or hypnotherapy or trauma EMDR or mushroom ceremony or cacao ceremony or spirituality. I don't mind what you do. Just go to
the gym and lift.
I mean, that too, because that also helps you release some of that heightened emotional stuff. You know, as long as it's not the only thing that you're doing, it can create a bit of distance between the emotional reaction that you're having, to find a bit more ease so you can connect inward. And then I'd say, across the board, start journaling. Start becoming curious about what's actually going on at 5 o'clock in the morning when you're awake and nobody else is awake, in that quiet time like you were saying. Ask the question, how am I feeling today? What's going on in my head? What's going around? And just write and write and write and write. And you will get to know yourself and the contents of your heart and your thoughts so profoundly that you will then be able to find inspiration or guidance or ideas, insight to what you need to do next. What's the next form of help I need? Who's going to show up to help me with this next part of it? But I mean that for all of us highly over-emotionals that have a lot of emotional world and it feels hardcore, like a daily practice. If you've ever heard of the morning pages, right, by the Artist's Way, that's an incredible thing. 3 A4 sides of writing every morning. Have you got time? How haven't you got time? Like, find a way. It takes 10 minutes. Do it in the car before you get out, before you go to work, after you drop the kids off. find time.
Just write big. Takes even less time.
Nope. Write smaller. It's like that thing, the Japanese meditation thing, that says something like, meditate for half an hour a day unless you're stressed, and then do it for 2. Yeah. And then same for the men who push down their feelings or have identified with being stoic, but actually it's not stoicism, it's just you've done a really excellent job of disconnecting from your emotional world. Start journaling, and you will see, give it some time, the outcome of that and how impactful it is for your relationships and for your productivity even, because guaranteed even the most seemingly unemotional man is got a whole world going on inside that maybe they're not even aware of. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I was going to say part way through that, but obviously I wanted to let you keep talking. So compounding traumas, compounding thoughts, feelings, all that kind of stuff. You've got the good compounding, where you're compounding good things, good thoughts,
habits,
good future visualization, that kind of stuff. But then you've got the bad compounding, where you're compounding bad memories, bad traumas, that kind of, well, every trauma is bad, but you're compounding that. Now, sticking to the whole identity theme, both of those are identities, aren't they?
Yes.
So if your identity is born from all the bad traumas, all the bad things that have happened in your life, and you don't know any other way to be, and that is essentially your identity now, how do you sort of really work your way out of that? Because if we're looking from at the beginning of this conversation where we were going, well, this was our identity and our identity's changed because of we were trying to fit in. If our identity has changed or essentially has become a compounding of our traumas, then if your identity was born from when you were young, growing up, what's the best way to change it to something better? Or when I say better, I don't want to say that people's identities are terrible or anything like that, but
no, I know what you mean.
You know,
more towards the essence of who you are rather than
more towards
living from
something
trauma.
that's going to make you happy.
Yeah.
Or head towards happiness sort of thing, rather than being miserable or wondering why life is so crap all the time.
I would say at that point, I would always seek help as a primary thing, because if that's all you know, then finding your way through what feels like brambles and weeds and overgrowth, swamp is going to feel actually impossible. And the visualization, the visual that I have a lot with clients who feel that way, is it feels like a massive brick wall that's unovercomable. And so you need somebody to hold space for you that can do it in a way that knows how to find the way round the wall, round the back way, or round the side. There's a side entrance that you can't see from your perspective.
Covered in ivy.
Yeah. And then I would say compound every day a visualization or hypnotherapy track or anything that at this point takes little to no effort on your part to start to reinforce. And all of this stuff is like imagining baby steps that when you look back in a year's time, you'll be really pleasantly and delightfully surprised at how far you've come. But when the brick wall feels so big, you need to take the most micro steps, but commit to the micro steps, but so that they don't feel like they're adding to your brick wall. So start very gently with getting some help, professional help, either from a somatic therapist, EMDR, or me, depending on the level of severity of your trauma. And then daily visualizations, listen to it, start your day how you mean to create your day. Those early morning thoughts are key to programming the rest of your day and recognizing that you have the power and the authority over your life, even in moments when you don't think you do. And I've got a whole heap of them on my podcast, and there will be more of them that I'm going to be adding in. But that's a great question. I think there's always more to it, and you and I could talk about this stuff for hours, and we do.
Yeah, because you work with people who are seeing therapists, because you sort of supplement that kind of thing as well. So
it depends.
I think sometimes with therapists, like people who have like CBT and all that kind of stuff, sometimes it's too logical and it's not really working in the covering the whole sort of gamut of things that people feel. You know, they're trying to be too introspective with a lot of these things, rather than going, hey, look, you're feeling what you're feeling. Let's work through that. And there's methods of doing all those sort of things, different matrices and different tools and stuff like that. And you use some of them. You know, we've used them together, haven't we?
Yeah.
But I think it's good to have different people looking at things, because you're never going to get everything you need from one person.
You're not. Absolutely not.
Because we've all got inbuilt biases.
Yeah.
You know,
and I think
whether we want to think that or not.
Definitely. But a good place to start is to start talking about it and becoming aware of it, and if you can choose somebody who isn't just going to focus on your thoughts but will also create awareness around that emotional piece too, and how you're feeling, and helping you primarily to feel safe within your body, and create grounding practices and safety using somatic therapy practices, which are all the things that I do, and you doing that as a priority, because you can't grow on an unsafe foundation. It's just impossible. Or, well, it's not impossible, it's possible, but what you create is always going to be wonky. So I would also say start somewhere. Like, don't try to overthink it all either. Like, you're not going to find the most perfect route to finding your own identity. Just start somewhere and take that first step. Like, for me, I started with children's yoga. I trained to become a kids yoga teacher, and it's not what I do now, but what I learned along the way with that was really fantastic. But I also learnt that I didn't want to be a kids yoga teacher.
Well, that's it. Sometimes it's trying things and finding that you don't like it, and then trying something else.
Yeah.
But a lot of
giving ourselves permission to do that.
Yeah, and sometimes finding your own identity, if you don't feel like you've got anywhere to start, it is just taking little steps and just going at it. And not worrying so much about the progress you're making. Because it's like in anything, some people work faster than others, some people make more progress. But there's always going to be a point where progress seems to just stop. You know, whether it's going to the gym, losing weight, all that kind of stuff. At some point it seems like you're not making any progress.
Yeah, just keep compounding.
You just
keep going.
Keep doing it.
Thank you, Ben, for being here, and I hope you will come back and have more of these conversations with me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to me and answering questions and just being an overall relatively nicely awesome person.
You're so cheeky. Right, see you next week.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.